Hello, this is Claves, the international politics program from PTS TV, which will be broadcast every Sunday. Today's program will look at the 5th Summit of the Americas, which took place in Trinidad and Tobago, and in the second part we will show reports about the recent parliamentary crisis in Bolivia. The 5th Summit of the Americas was held in Trinidad and Tobago between last Friday and today, April the 19th. These summits have been taking place since 1994 and group the continent's 34 countries, except for Cuba. The images from the last summit, which was held in the Argentine city of Mar del Plata in 2005, illustrated the strains under which American hegemony in the region was being placed, with the jeers against then-President George Bush and the nationalist and anti-US discourse of the bloc led by Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. The summit this weekend, unlike the previous one, was not characterized by jeers and highly charged speeches, but was held against the backdrop of the global economic crisis and the possible implications for the region of the change of government in the US and political gestures between Washington and Havana. I spoke on the phone to Eduardo Molina, who gave us an analysis of the summit. Eduardo is a member of the Revolutionary Workers' League, 4th International, the PTS sister organization in Bolivia, and editor of the Bolivian newspaper Palabra Obrera. In this first block, we will listen to what he has to say about the context of the summit and Obama's attempt to regain influence in what his country has historically considered its backyard. Obama's approach to Latin America bears the seal of the global crisis of domination, by which I mean of hegemony of the USA, which has been sharpening since the late period of the Bush government, and which is accelerated by the global economic crisis, because the US doesn't have the authority to impose its conditions on a global level, neither against its rival fellow imperialists like the European powers or Japan, or against the so-called emerging powers, like in the case of China and Russia.
Ni frente a las llamadas potencias emergentes, como es el caso de China y Rusia.
This forced a change in the style of politics. Evidently, Obama, with a line of abandoning Republican-style unilateralism, offering himself to dialogue with other governments, presenting himself, the US government, not as one there to impose conditions, but rather one who is prepared to dialogue and seek consensus, by no means abandons the strategic objectives of US imperialism, either at a global level or in Latin America.
Del imperialismo norteamericano, ni a nivel mundial ni en América Latina.
This change, which is a recognition of the balance of power, as much due to the economic and political weakness of the US as the emergence of other powers with which it has to sit down and negotiate, is reflected in the taking up of positive gestures and the line of a good neighbour policy towards the countries in the region, which is what is being showed by this Summit of the Americas. If we recall, for example, the presence of Bush in Mar del Plata at the 5th summit some years ago, and the current tone of Obama, there are two pretty different scenarios and approaches. From this point of view, the U-turn in the Americans' approach is in order to take advantage of Obama's domestic and foreign popularity, in order to improve relations with the different governments, in order to diffuse the conflicts with different countries, and to adapt US policy towards Latin America, like I said before, to the balance of power in the region.
Para distender las líneas de fricción que había en los distintos países y para adecuar la política exterior norteamericana hacia América Latina a como decía antes, a las relaciones de fuerza con la región.
On the other hand, the US, at the summit currently going ahead in Port Spain, has very little to offer and many demands to make, even though they do it with a friendly tone, with friendly gestures, out of good neighbourliness, people who want to dialogue. This is to do with the fact that the US needs to regain control over the countries of the hemisphere, especially in the face of European competition, as part of its attempt to recompose its global hegemony. It's to do with the fact that at this time of economic crisis, they need to defend the interests of their own multinationals, unloading the greater part of their own crisis on the countries of the region. On the other hand, the Latin American governments find themselves, in the face of the crisis' impact upon the region, needing to resort to sources of international financing like the IMF and World Bank.
Recurrir nuevamente a las fuentes de financiamiento internacional, como el FMI y como el BID. en esta cumbre de crisis y donde
In this crisis summit, and where the terms and conditions of submission to the US are being discussed, the different actors have one eye on the economic crisis, one eye on the deterioration of US hegemony and the way that the US is adapting with a multilateralist or conciliatory approach to this situation. And all this attention is being paid in the context of an economic crisis which is pushing Latin America towards recession and which presents the risk of political destabilization and mass struggles on the continent, as is being warned by the very same agenda of this Summit of the Americas, under the heading of security.
Y lucha de masas en el continente, como ya están advirtiendo en el propio temario de la Cumbre de las Américas, en el punto seguridad, o como advierten las autoridades de la CEPAL, por ejemplo.